Hello and welcome to my channel, Rhino here. Today, I noticed that Answers in Genesis Canada has uploaded more than 70 videos in the last 2 months, but they only seem to be getting about 20 to 40 views per video. That's rough. I understand the effort that gets put into producing YouTube videos, so I thought I'd help them out a bit, seeing as how usually at least a few dozen of my viewers check out the originals. The video I've chosen is one that just frankly caught my eye. It's titled, Is God Ever a Bully? So let's see what they have to say.
Is the God of the Bible a bully?
Yes. Thanks for watching. Special thanks as always to my patrons, who are the... Oh, wait, there's more? Damn it. Okay, fine, I'll keep going.
Welcome to Critical Thinking Skin.
Oh, is that what CT stands for? I never would have guessed, especially since AIG usually seems to suppress critical thinking with an appeal to the most simplistic interpretation of a few chapters of Genesis. After all, the head of AIG, Ken Ham's most memorable line from his debate that was supposed to be about science was about having a book.
There is a book called the Bible. It's a very unique book. It's very different to any other book out there.
Where we look at how you can think about any faith-challenging message and arrive at a biblical, logical conclusion yourself.
Wait, what? You just basically said that you are going to indoctrinate people into indoctrinating themselves. Or at least that's what my critical thinking skills have told me that sentence you just uttered means.
I'm Patricia Engler, and today let's look at another top objection to Christianity which argues that the God of the Bible, and especially the Old Testament, is not good.
I mean, yeah, the Old Testament God is most obviously a dick to the people who were alive at the time, but if you take the theology at its word, then New Testament God is actually the biggest jerk of the two. The concept of hell didn't show up until Jesus brought it up. Before that, death was described in a similar fashion as the other ancient Near Eastern religions. It's just kind of a state of existence, neither good nor bad, just a permanent meh. No mention of hell, no mention of heaven, except the occasional prophet who gets to go live with God himself, but that's not open to the general population. So, yeah, God may have just straight up murdered a bunch of people for really petty reasons in the Old Testament, but it's the New Testament where the love me or else I will torture you forever shows up, and that's way worse.
Now, incidentally, judging God's behavior as absolutely not good requires having absolute moral standards.
Who said anything about absolutely not good? I don't need absolute moral standards to determine that I don't like the idea of somebody casually murdering a bunch of people for bad reasons. This argument is not only a straw man, it's a cop-out that stops you from engaging in critical thinking. I don't need to consider the moral implications of God's actions because God is the source of morality, so of course his actions are good. That is not critical thought. That is blind acceptance.
Which, as we saw in episode 62, atheistic worldviews don't supply.
Maybe I'll go back and do episode 62 later, but yeah, an atheistic worldview does not supply an absolute moral view. I would argue that the Christian worldview doesn't do that either. You could argue for objective morality where actions can be objectively measured to be either good or bad, but absolute morality is absolutely out. Absolute morality is the idea that an action is moral or immoral regardless of the situation. So, is killing wrong? Yes, killing is wrong. And nothing can justify it because it is absolutely wrong. Self-defense? Nope, it's wrong. And actually, I used to go to a church that supported this idea. I once heard a sermon there where the pastor proudly proclaimed that he would not use violence to defend himself or his family from a home invasion because violence is absolutely wrong. Of course, this view is not supported biblically. If killing and violence were absolutely wrong, then violently killing people wouldn't be the punishment for so many crimes. So, if you think there are situations that justify acts that you normally would consider immoral, then you do not believe in absolute morality.
God's character provides the foundation for morals.
No. The morals of the people who call themselves Christian always get imposed on the religion as though they are the God character's morals, but that is not the case. There's a reason there are a bunch of apologetics trying to make Old Testament slavery seem less like chattel slavery and more like having hired servants, because slavery goes against most people's morality, yet the Bible condones it. And yes, the Bible condones chattel slavery too, not just the indentured servitude, which, even indentured servitude, the way it's described in the Bible, is also immoral.
Yet people attack God's moral character, for instance, because he drowned people in the global flood, sent plagues on Egypt, commanded the Israelites to kill other nations, destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah and Jericho, let Satan attack Job, told Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, and condemns people to hell.
Well, yeah. If any human being did all of that shit that you just said, you'd be right there agreeing that they are immoral. But because it's God, God gets a pass. And I'm willing to bet that it's not because of any critical thinking, it's just because he's God, so he is the source of morality. So clearly he can't do anything bad, and if it looks bad, it's part of his plan that we can't possibly understand. Is that it? Because that is not critical thinking, that's lazy thinking.
Detailed answers exist for all these topics.
Do you maybe want to consider why you need detailed answers to address all of those obviously immoral points that you just brought up? Could it possibly be because people generally consider such actions to be immoral, and rather than using critical thinking skills to suss out your own personal morality, you just want to give up and let God do the moral thinking for you? It must be moral because God is moral, so now I have to come up with post hoc rationalizations for why this immoral behavior actually is moral. Otherwise, I might have to actually reconsider my position.
And the resources linked to this video cover many of them. But for now, let's explore how to think about these arguments more generally by checking what Scripture says about three things: human nature, God's character, and a way of salvation.
So, quick, before she gets into the Bible, I'll give these a go. So, thinking about these events with human nature in mind, most of us just naturally feel like those events were immoral. We just generally don't like the idea of genocide. Now, I can't speak to the culture of the time when those events supposedly happened, but in our culture today, this is how it is. And there is evidence to suggest that morality shifts with culture, so if the culture was different back then, they may not have seen these events as immoral. As to God's character, he comes across as petty, vindictive, and cruel. He straight up kills a guy for trying to protect his precious Ark of the Covenant, because in trying to protect it, he touched it, and God just can't have us icky humans touching his special box. When Saul angered God by not being genocidal enough for his tastes, rather than just remove him from power, he sent a spirit to torment him. And you know how the Levites are the tribe of priests? Do you know how they got that position? They were the ones who answered the call when Moses told them that God wanted them to go through the Israelite camp, slaughtering brothers, sons, companions, and neighbors for the crime of having switched religions. As for the way of salvation, if we are to accept the Jesus story as true, then that means that the vast majority of these people that God either killed himself or had other people kill for him ended up being tortured for all eternity in hell. So if that's the path to salvation, it's not a very good one, at least not from a human perspective.
First, human nature. Genesis explains that God created a very good world as the perfect home for humankind.
I mean, is it really the perfect home for humankind if he also created the being who would convince humankind to break the one rule that God laid out? Forget the serpent. Is it really the perfect home for humankind if it contains a tree whose fruit looked like they'd be really, really scrumptious, but should you eat from that tree, the entire planet gets permanently cursed?
But like Romans 5:12 summarizes, sin came into the world through one man, Adam, and death through sin. And so death spread to all men because all sinned.
Okay, so let's apply some critical thinking to this. Instead of just accepting it at face value because it's in a book that I decided is always right about everything it says, I can look at this and think about what a perfect world might have looked like. And if Eden really were supposed to be perfect, I can use it as a model. I find two simple modifications to the Eden model that will make it actually be perfect, or at least closer to perfection than it was. No serpent, and no tree of knowledge of good and evil. Now, Adam and Eve can't bring sin into the world, and everything is hunky-dory. Of course, this leads to future problems with the design. Eventually, the world will be overpopulated with people and animals who keep mating but can't die, so that's an issue. But it would be an idyllic life for a lot longer than God's original design. But ignoring all of that, Adam sinned. Therefore, all of his descendants should be punished? Does that seem moral? If I do something wrong now, should my great-great-grandkids be punished for it? No, of course not. Only the person who commits the act should receive the punishment for the act.
We were all in Adam when he fell, so we've all sinned, like Romans 3:23 says.
I'm sorry, did you just say that we were all in Adam when he sinned? Okay, so I just went back to the YouTube page and turned on closed captioning, which were not auto-generated, meaning that they were deliberately typed out, and yeah, I did not mishear that. We were all inside Adam when he fell. I think someone needs to explain to AIG how babies work, because no, we absolutely were not in Adam when he fell. Like, how would that even work? Did Adam have a specific sperm that would be able to create every single person who would ever exist? Did these sperm not go through the normal process of either being ejected or being reabsorbed by the body? And would that mean that Eve had all of the eggs that would match up with these sperm cells to create all of the people? Because the sperm isn't the be-all and end-all, it's only half the genetic material. So for this interpretation to work, Eve has to have an egg for every person to have ever existed, which at the current moment adds up to just over 100 billion. Women usually start life with about 1 million egg cells, so that's 5 orders of magnitude more eggs for Eve than is normal. And that would also assume that Adam had all of this sperm simultaneously, which is less impressive than the eggs, but the average man makes about 1 billion sperm per month, so that is a 100-month supply of sperm in his balls at one time. Unless you mean we were spiritually in him somehow? Was he possessed by the spirits of 100 billion people at one time? Did our spirits have consciousness that we forgot about? Did they have any say in his fall? Was their choice to eat the fruit a democratic process with the spirits of 100 billion not yet born people all weighing in on it, and that's why the fall applies to all of us? I don't know, man. This is introducing some seriously weird theology here.
And the consequence for sin is death.
And who created this system of rules? It was supposed to have been God, was it not? So could he not have made a system that is more reflective of actual justice instead of creating an obviously unjust and unfair system with the punishment that is disproportionate to the crime? Like, seriously, you're saying here that if you live your life entirely perfectly but tell one single little lie, then that lie is enough to give you the death penalty. And it's even worse than that because it's not just death, it is eternal torture after death. And it's even worse than that because you just said that we were in Adam when he sinned and so we were a part of that sin. So the crime that we are being executed and tortured for was one that happened, in your view, 6,000 years before we were even born. In what twisted and warped view of justice could this possibly be considered just?
It's cause and effect. See, God is the giver of life and everything good. So when we separate ourselves from God through sin, we cut ourselves off from life.
But it wasn't us who did that. It was Adam. You're just retconning our presence into Adam in order to make our hereditary sin seem like it's not as heinous a miscarriage of justice as it is.
By rejecting God, we reject everything good that comes from God, leaving only hell.
Yeah, this is the classic, God doesn't send you to hell, you choose to go there yourself by rejecting God. Which is a terrible argument. God has not provided me with sufficient evidence to believe in him, despite what Romans 1:20 says. I am of the opinion that we do not choose our beliefs. I don't choose what I find to be convincing. It will either convince me or it will not. I am not convinced of God's existence. If God wanted to convince me of his existence, it would be a trivial matter for him, but thus far he has not. Even laying this aside, setting up a system of choose me or burn forever is not moral. It is applying duress to a choice, and a choice made under duress is not truly a choice.
So biblically speaking, no one in history has ever deserved anything but death.
What a bleak outlook on life. I have more faith in humanity than that.
Anything besides hell is God's grace.
Do you not see how that sounds exactly like an abusive relationship? I only threaten you with hell because I love you. I'm so generous in allowing you to not be in hell right now. You should be thankful. Now love me or burn forever.
So God cannot mistreat innocent humans because no human is truly innocent.
You deserved to be hit. Come on, apply some of those critical thinking skills you're supposed to be teaching. This is almost exactly the language that abusers use to justify their abuse. If the justification for how God behaves matches exactly with what an abuser says to justify abusing their partner, then that means that either the abuser is justified or God is an abuser and is unjustified. As an atheist, I don't have to just accept that everything God does is good without question, so I'm free to go ahead and say that if the God of the Bible exists, he is is a serial abuser, but you, host of the Critical Thinking Scan show, have to suppress your critical thoughts in order to justify the abuse. Will the show that is called Critical Thinking Scan actually start to display some critical thinking skills? To find out, tune in tomorrow. Same Rhino time, same Rhino channel.